Valorant is a game of precision and accuracy. One wrong move can cost you literal matches in just milliseconds, and that's what can be so enticing about the game, but also so terrifying at the same time. For some players, precision and accuracy seems to be their middle name. For others, that's not always the case. We're going to be focusing on those other players today and how they struggle with their aim at times, and talk about what the reason for these whiffs are versus other players. Because there's actually a reason that you whiff in these engagements, and that reason is normally more than just you have bad aim. This video is a counterpart to the different video that we did the other day, where we talked about how players are losing games because of factors other than their aim, but today I want to specifically talk about aiming mechanics that are causing you to whiff shots. Let's start off with an aiming mechanic that many players maybe haven't heard talked about yet though, and that's how to deal with your crosshair placement when rounds get a little chaotic. Specifically, the type of chaos that we're going to be talking about is smokes. By the way, to showcase these mechanics, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of our SkillCapped viewers' games and breaking down exactly what happened to these rounds that caused them to whiff these shots. So take a look at this round. This is going to be taking place quickly, so pay attention. Our hero is Indy. They're going to be taking part in a retake on A site Ascent, and he's going to be throwing down his cage first to give himself some room to drop down towards Hell safely. Obviously, this is going to create a little bit of chaos, but this is something you can do when retaking, especially when behind in numbers. Because if you're behind in numbers, sometimes creating a little bit of chaos is something that can bail you out. Notice how after Indy drops into Hell, they pick up a kill onto the enemy Killjoy and immediately run towards the other side of Hell. Now, as they're running towards the corner to clear it out, they hear the enemy Jet enters the Cypher cage and begins to pre-aim the cage in an effort to kill the Jet when she pushes through. Now, the problem with their pre-aim right now is when aiming at smokes, you really want to avoid aiming at the center of the smoke. Generally, what you want to do instead is aim at the side of the smoke, because players are conditioned to, when pushing out of smokes, strafe out of them. The reason for this is if you run directly through a smoke in Valorant, your gun will poke through the center of it, so because of this, generally players will either exit out of a smoke at the side of it or at the back of it. And because Indy ran into the corner, it's likely this player heard that, and with that information is not going to sprint directly into his face. Instead, it's far more likely that this player exits the smoke from the back of Hell or from the left like they did in an attempt to catch them off guard. And because this Jet actually wide swings out of the cage, notice how far Indy needs to adjust their crosshair after aiming at the center of the smoke. Basically, if you aim at the center of the smoke, it's only going to help you if they exit the smoke from that specific spot. But if you aim towards the edge of the smoke, you make it so if the enemy exits the smoke pretty much anywhere, you won't have to adjust nearly as far to deal with the peek. This is apparent when shown in this clip, but it's also shown in many other situations in your games. It doesn't just have to be a Cypher cage. For example, if you're approaching a lurk smoke, you generally aren't going to want to be aiming at the center of it. You want to aim at the back of it because players generally aren't going to just push straight through the smoke. They're going to use the smoke as cover and exit through the back of it to help them isolate angles. So if you aim at the center of the smoke, you're just causing yourself to have to adjust your crosshair more than you normally should have. Wait, hello? The fastest way to improve your aiming mechanics and become the best player you can be in Valorant is by subscribing to SkillCapped.com, and it's backed by our rank improvement guarantee, so players have literally nothing to lose by checking it out. Thank you so much for letting me know that, Hiko. I'll be sure to check out SkillCapped.com in the description below so I can start climbing right away. Sorry about that, guys. I got a phone call. Anyway, you guys want to talk about how to pre-aim correctly in Valorant? You've maybe heard this stuff before, but it's nice to have real game examples to showcase how these things can be problematic for players, so take a look at this. When you're looking to peek an angle, either you're going to pre-aim the wall, meaning you're going to aim where you believe the enemy will be standing on the other side of the wall, or you're going to trace the wall, meaning you're not sure where the enemy is, so you want to trace along the edge of the wall to be prepared for when you spot the enemy. You're pretty much always going to be using one of these two things when you're peeking corners. You'll pre-aim enemies when you believe they're going to be standing on a standard angle, and you'll trace when you believe they could be on an off angle. However, something a lot of players do wrong when tracing an angle is they get lazy with it and they'll let their crosshair linger inside of a wall. This probably isn't something players will notice unless they're looking for it, so it's something that's important for us to point out. This isn't good, and it sort of defeats the purpose of tracing an angle, because your main goal should be to have your crosshair on the target's head when you see them. However, that's not going to be possible if your crosshair is floating in the wall. This is going to result in encounters where you will whiff, and don't worry, I promise you, you will whiff because of this. So be sure to not get lazy with your crosshair placement because it's practically the whole game. But the other form of this is pre-aiming, and like we said, this is when you aim for where you believe the enemy will be before you peek the angle. That's why this is generally used to clear common angles. So generally, this will result in players looking like they're staring at the wall, and this is because when they move around the corner, their crosshair should be where the enemy is. However, when this is done poorly, it will look a little bit like this. Notice how how our new hero, Luke, has his crosshair sitting pretty much in the middle of ramp when he peeks this. And optimally, if you were doing this correctly, he'd be aiming towards the top of ramp where the Yoru is. Now, he obviously can't predict Yoru's exact location, and this is another part of the problem with how he peeked this angle. Basically, there is one area that he knows Yoru is not right now, and that is directly to his left on this slant because his teammate is currently watching this from screens. So basically, this either means Yoru is against the wall on the left or pushing up ramps. Both of these things are probably equally possible. So what would probably be safer for Cypher to do instead is first pre-aim the ramp and see if Yoru is there, and then after that is cleared, turn his attention towards the left here. The reason this is better is because the way Cypher actually peeked this, he ended up exposing himself to both angles at the same time, and it resulted in his crosshair sort of just floating in between and him having to adjust. This is part of the reason that he's whiffing so hard right here. Now, the other part of the reason is because he's currently using a Ghost, and the Ghost is a pretty heavy tap fire gun. Similar to the Vandal in some regards, you don't really want to be spamming with the Ghost, and instead you want to take your time to land those headshots. To be honest, this is pretty much the case with most guns, but specifically with the Ghost, you want to take your time and make sure to get the rhythm down in which you can have accurate shots. That rhythm is going to sound something like this. Notice how Luke is spamming just a little bit faster than this, and it's part of the reason it takes him 13 shots to land a kill on a target who wasn't even looking at him initially. And these two things together are what's going to cause one of the biggest issues for most players. It's the fact that their pre-aim isn't good, and the fact that they're not good at controlling recoil on guns, so they have to do these massive adjustments to hit players. And then because of that, their crosshair isn't even on the enemy when they start shooting, so they start out the spray by missing shots, and then they can't correct it because they don't know how to spray. Let's take a look at two more examples where players struggle with their aim though. Specifically, what we're going to be focusing on though is how these players get wrecked based off of their bad crosshair placement tactics. Take a look at this clip from later in the game with Luke. This is going to be a 2v2 post-plant scenario in which they're both holding A site on split. Notice how Luke is aiming at the corner of elbow, waiting for his enemy to peek him. So what's wrong with this so far? His crosshair is at head level, it's not in the corner of the wall. What's the problem? Well, you'll notice as the round plays out, what's going to happen is he's going to hear the enemy Omen full sprinting up elbow, and if the Omen is currently full sprinting and he is aiming this close to the wall, Luke is going to have some real zoomer reaction times to land this shot. And you'll see, as Omen swings this corner, he's going to run right past Luke's crosshair and annihilate him. This stuff is frustrating when it happens to you, but if you hear somebody full sprinting around a corner, you need to adjust your crosshair to match the speed that they'll swing the angle. Just in general, players prefer to swing this angle, I've noticed, so it might be a little bit better for him to aim just a bit further from the corner in the future, unless he believes somebody is going to just walk around the corner. Luke didn't whiff on this guy because his aim itself is bad, he whiffed because his crosshair placement was off. All of these things take a large amount of game sense and map knowledge to understand, so don't feel bad if you don't have a good grasp on this stuff yet, but let's take a look at one more example. This is going back to the game with Indy, and this time he's going to be taking a duel in tree on ascent. These things happen so fast, so sometimes it's hard to keep up with, but when the editors slow it down for you, notice how when Indy peeks this angle in tree, his crosshair isn't sitting in the doorway of Catwalk, it's sitting on the right side of the door frame. This just comes down to sloppy crosshair placement. If his crosshair is actually in the doorway, there's a high chance that he lands this kill, but because it's not, he needs to now not only react to the Sova, but adjust his crosshair to hit him. This Sova doesn't even kill him right away either. He's able to get a good 7 to 8 shots off before losing this duel, which is why it's important that when you're going for these peaks, you're able to make them as easy as possible. Because you'll generally find if your mechanics like this are better than your opponents, oftentimes you'll have a lot more time to kill them than you realize. He still gets the chance to correct at this point, but because he panics and commits to a spray, he's not able to adjust in time and actually dies. One last thing you'll also notice from this clip is that Indy doesn't actually even come to a full stop before shooting his first bullet either, making it so his spray also starts out inaccurate as well. The funny thing is, if you freeze the frame directly on when his first shot is fired, his crosshair is actually dangerously close to the head, meaning there's probably another world where he lands this shot. But just all of these things combined, his crosshair placement and his movement, end up really biting Indy here. Let's talk about one final thing though that a lot of players have an issue with that will cause them to lose more gunfights, and that's finally crouching. And before I go into it, it's important that players know that there are good times to crouch, but if you're newer to the game, the general rule of thumb is just don't crouch. The reason is because players who are lower rank generally have worse crosshair placement, and it's going to cause their crosshair to hang a little bit lower, so when you crouch, you're sort of ducking into their crosshair. The other reason is because it makes you a very stationary target, meaning that you will be easier to headshot because you can't move as freely. This is especially noticeable when fighting players at a distance because if you're moving, you're constantly going to have to be adjusting your crosshair. However, if you crouch, it's going to make it so they only have to aim in one position so they can correct more easily. This isn't Apex Legends. Enemies don't take 4 years to kill, but you have more time than you think in gunfights in Valorant, so try to remember this. You're going to get one-tapped sometimes, but that won't happen as frequently if you have good positioning and peek angles correctly, and it also won't happen as often if you don't crouch in every single gunfight. Take a look at this round from Luke's game where he currently has a Spectre. By the way, given the context, I feel it's important to mention the Spectre is the best run and gun weapon in the game, and that's one of the big strengths of it, so that's one reason I'd avoid crouching. But the big reason I want to showcase this is because it's a good example of a player who has a crouching habit. Notice how every single fight that Luke takes in this round, he is crouching immediately. Some of these fights, maybe it's okay for him to crouch. Some of them, he really shouldn't. An example of the fight where he shouldn't crouch is against the Sova, who has a Sheriff in B main. A Sheriff is a headshot single fire weapon, and when crouching it makes it incredibly easy to hit that headshot. Now, I'm not recommending that he run and guns at this range, but instead of what he could do is throw out a burst of bullets, strafe to the right slightly, and then shoot another burst. This is a good way to keep on the move and make it difficult for Sova to land his shots, while also returning fire to land the kill. I can't emphasize this enough, crouching versus players who are using a Sheriff is probably one of the easiest ways to get yourself killed. But notice how once Luke swings out of B main, he once again commits to a full spray while crouching against 2 targets in front of him after missing his first few shots. If you've missed your first few shots, your spray is already off. In this situation, rather than doubling down, what I would recommend is don't crouch, cut your losses on the first spray, strafe towards the left, let your spray reset, and then quickly fire off another burst at the enemy when your spray is accurate again. Look at how much time Luke has here versus these players. They are not killing him immediately. He easily has enough time to let his Spectre reset and then start shooting again. Lastly though, I want to show one final clip of why crouching is affecting your aim negatively, and to do that we're going to take a look at one more clip from Luke later in the game. So the reasons we already said crouching is bad is because it makes you a stationary target and it makes it easier for enemies with bad crosshair placement to headshot you. But another reason crouching is bad is because you're going to lower your crosshair placement as well. Because if you're constantly aiming for the head, when you crouch, your crosshair placement is going to go down to body level. And this isn't going to be as noticeable until you actually go through and slow down the rounds to see it. Notice how once again in this round, Luke is going to be using a Ghost. We already talked about how Luke seems to have a problem with spamming with the Ghost, and you're going to see that again in this clip, but you're also going to notice the crouching problem once again. As the clip starts, Luke is going to hear the last player, Sage, take a step in B heaven, and he's going to prepare to swing this. Notice his initial pre-aim is a lot better in this clip. It's at head level around where the Sage would be in heaven, but he still has to adjust a bit. Most of the time your pre-aim is not going to be perfect, and it will take a little bit of adjustment, so this is fine. Unfortunately, Luke is going to over-adjust though and fire his first shot far to the left. Luckily though, his second shot he's actually going to be able to adjust directly onto the Sage. Unfortunately though, because of his crouching habit that we talked about, he's already started his crouch animation and it actually pulls his crosshair down to the neck level on Sage. If he didn't start his crouch here, he almost for sure would have headshot the Sage with his second bullet and finished her off. But because he started to crouch, he lands 3 body shots and gets killed in 2 right clicks from the Sage. Now, it is a little ridiculous that she double right-clicked him from this range, but that's beside the point. He basically whiffed on a kill that he should have got, all because he crouched. He was aiming his crosshair at her, but still managed to whiff because of other shooting mechanics. Anyway, I hope this was helpful for you guys to learn a few things. We plan to do more VOD reviews, stuff like this in the future, so if you're looking forward to that, be sure to subscribe to the channel down below. It really does help us out. Also, hey there, you. Yeah, you. Have you checked out SkillCapped.com yet? I personally think the coolest thing that we have at SkillCapped is our Smurf commentaries where higher-ranked players will walk you through their thought process and the reasoning behind their plays. I have a few of those available on the website, and they're actually super hands-on style of videos, which is really helpful. If you want to check out that style of content and to get the rank that you've always wanted, I highly recommend checking out SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Thank you Luke and Indy for sending in these VODs for me. I hope I was able to provide some sort of insight. I believe both of these players were gold or platinum, so they by no means are brand new players. I think a lot of these things are just stuff that they know they should be doing that go overlooked when you're in the actual heat of the game. Especially that crouching thing. Many players don't even realize that they have a crouching problem, which can be really problematic for fixing it, obviously, because they don't know they have it. Anyways, as always, my name is King, and we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching. We will catch you in the next one.